Julius Caesar's grandfather, who ran the firefighter guild in Rome, started staging attacks as a pretext to basically garner protection money from people living in that ancient city. But let's just start there. About 2,100 plus years ago in Rome, the local fire department wasn't our great fire department today. I think firefighters are some of the men and women are some of the final servants that are left in government. But back then, the local fire department was paid by the different ethnic neighborhoods in Rome. The Greeks, the Jews, the Romans, and others were all basically segregated. And if you didn't pay the fire department your protection money, similar to the East Coast Mafia 100 years ago, they would burn down your block, they would set fire to your neighborhood, and they wouldn't show up to help you put it out. Now that right there is a perfect example of problem, reaction, solution. It's supposedly the fire department, it's there to put fires out, but if you don't pay them protection money, they're going to burn you out. And the money that family gained for pioneering that was used to take over that society and fund the first dictator of Rome, which then led to the decline of that republic into a very despotic and abusive hegemonic empire throughout Asia, the Middle East, and of course Central and even Western Europe. Fast forwarding through history, the British Empire would routinely finance a rogue group or country to attack the next country, and then after they were done killing each other, the British Empire would come in and pick up the pieces. This is just a more sophisticated form of divide and conquer, where you ensure that the climate is there to cause that to happen. And then, of course, I talk a lot about this. I won't spend much time on it tonight, but it's part of the record that Hitler's stormtroopers were involved with Hermann Goering setting fire to their Capitol building, their parliamentary building, the Reichstag, on February 27th, 1933. And the actual Nazi documents have been released from late 1939. It's all on my film Terror Storm, where you have a German military base, a radio relay center on the border with Poland across from Gleiwitz, which was a German Poland. And they had the newsreel cameras there, the film cameras there. They dressed up a few concentration camp prisoners, shot them, shot newsreel footage of them as dead Polish soldiers, claimed the Poles had attacked Germany, and World War II was officially off to the races. That's how World War II started. But there's a bigger example of problem, reaction, solution leading up to World War II. The British and some of the most wealthy families in the United States funded Adolf Hitler, funded him even before he came to power in 1933, with the intention all along of building him up and telling him to go ahead and launch attacks, and then knowing that they would then turn against him and use that for the downfall of Europe to come in with the British and American empire, known as the Anglo-American establishment, and take over Europe itself and use it as an engine of global domination. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, our current president's grandfather, Prescott Bush, the father of Bush 41, the grandfather of Bush 43, was the top, this is the New York Times, this is New Jersey papers, this is a score of papers, it's in my film Martial Law, it's all online, you can read the scans, the original newspapers, was the top U.S. Nazi inside the United States. Inside this country, he was the top Nazi. And he ran the board of Brown Brother and Harriman right down there, just a few blocks from Ground Zero in New York City. And after World War II, hundreds of billions of dollars, and that was hundreds of billions of dollars in 1945 money, was put in U.S. and Latin American banks, and Prescott Bush managed that money and doled it out to over 15,000 Nazis in Central South America, and right here in Austin, Texas, and Midland, Texas, and Dallas, Texas, and Houston, Texas. That's where the Nazis came, and he was the honey cow who sat there distributing the money to them, and he used Nazi money to buy a seat in the U.S. in the U.S. Senate. That is historical fact. And before World War II, and the lead up to it, the mid-1930s, this came out in congressional hearings. I'm making a film about it right now. I have the old newsreels. They went to a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, the biggest hero in that current time. I mean, he was like a Roger Staubach or a Lance Armstrong. He was Smedley Butler, Marine Corps General. And Smedley Butler had overthrown 16 countries. He'd gone in coup d'etats. He'd staged terror attacks. He'd done it all. And they came to Smedley Butler and they said, we want you to lead the Army and the Marine Corps under your command to overthrow the federal government and set up a fascist dictatorship to merge with Hitler. Think about that. And Smedley Butler said no and went public. We have the newsreels with him at the movie theaters warning the people. There were congressional hearings. All of this came out. So you look at what they're doing today, it's nothing new. Those apples didn't fall far from the tree. But this time they're being more incremental about it. This time they're taking their time setting it up. They've taken decades and decades and decades to put this in place, and now they're bringing us their New World Order. Now, the U.S. is not their only target, though they want to seize us as an engine to project our power globally, because global hegemon is the goal, just as Hitler seized Germany to then focus it around the planet from North Africa to Eastern Europe to England. If we look at other case point examples, and these are declassified, admitted, open source, not debated. Anytime you're debating someone, you can go print these up, CIA.gov. You can bring these forward to them. This is admitted that Norman Schwarzkopf's father was one of the chief operatives with the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. And they went in 1953 to Iran with a democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, who'd driven the communists out of his country. But he said, he was Time Magazine Man of the Year. And he said, I want 20% of the oil revenue for my people. Anglo-American Oil, now British Petroleum, does not deserve all of it. We get 20%. I want to help my people. Trained in England, trained in Paris, poet, very intellectual. They couldn't put up with that. They don't want people in the Middle East wearing suits and ties and building their nations up. They want them running around, with a big sword trying to chop everybody's head off, at least that archetypal image. So the CIA declassified with the after-action reports to 10 Downing Street and to Dwight D. Eisenhower from Kermit Roosevelt, who later even wrote a book about it in the late 1990s before he died in 2000, bragging how 10 CIA officers and less than 10 MI6 officers went in with tens of millions of dollars into Iran, and in the span of 2 months went out and bombed mosques, shot crowds, kidnapped religious leaders, killed them, and printed up in each city thousands of handbills, flyers, saying, up with Mossadegh, up with communism, down with Allah. And they went in there, and the people weren't sophisticated like the American people aren't sophisticated. They bought into it. They went and arrested Mohammad Mossadegh. He spent the rest of his life in prison, but he did do better than his staff and his cabinet. They were beheaded. They were beheaded for crimes that CIA and MI6 had carried out and committed, and that is totally declassified. We knew going back to 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin, because captains of the ships spoke out. People always say, well, if the government did stuff like this, people speak out. They do speak out, but they get ignored. The control press at that time could regionalize it. So it came out in the San Diego Herald Tribune that none of our ships were attacked in the Gulf of Tonkin, that in reality they sent in Navy SEAL-type boats, small boats to attack the coastline, trying to elicit a response from the North Vietnamese to launch and escalate the war. And that they were smart enough not to strike back. They knew that it was a provocation. So, what happened from that point forward? We now, 3 years ago it was declassified. We have thousands of hours, and I've listened to literally 50 hours just trying to find it. We have found it. We have played it on the radio, where LBJ is out of his ranch in Johnson City, just about 40 miles from here, 50 miles from here, and he's on the phone with McNamara, and they're talking about how they staged the event and what the president's supposed to say to the press. And it's clearly McNamara in the power position, representing the elites, the big corporations, telling the president, his monkey, what to do. And here he is explaining that they staged the event, and this is what he's got to go say. And people go, well, at least they didn't blow up any of the ships. No one died. That's not true. That lie, just like the WMD lie with Iraq, which was premeditated, we now have the White House memo, led to the deaths of 58,000 American servicemen and women, and conservatively 1.4 million in the South and several million in the North. So we're looking at over 3 million dead people based on a declassified public false flag event. Now, I would talk about Gulf of Tonkin being staged 10 years ago, and I was called a conspiracy theorist. But now it has been on the mainstream news, it's been in the Associated Press, it is now part of the record that the Gulf of Tonkin was staged. There have been Thank you. There have been so many staged events that I'm not going to spend all night on them here. But fast forwarding to 9/11. Earlier, they showed you clips of the firefighters, and there's a whole bunch of these clips saying it was like the inside of a volcano at the North and South Towers collapse zones there at ground zero. It was like a foundry, a steel foundry, pools of molten steel. But we just don't have their eyewitness testimonies. We have the video of, in localized spots on the North and South Tower. 10 feet away, there's a woman waving her shirt, begging for help that never came, that couldn't come. The firefighters had tried to come help, and the globalists blew them up with them. The woman and the man she's next to aren't melting. They're not on fire. But right next to them, just a few yards away, huge 4-foot around steel columns have, right before it collapses, lava, literal molten metal pouring out with those localized thermate charges placed on them, and the steel's been collected, the dust has been collected, the exact signature, multiple physicists have looked at it, it's been peer reviewed, this is the reality, and the feds are howling with anger. They've got their disinformation agents going absolutely wild out there trying to stop this from coming out. We also had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of firefighters that did survive on record telling people that bombs were going off right before it collapsed in the lower floors. Huge explosions. We have the seismographs. We have the eyewitnesses. The government then declares national security and says none of those thousands of after-action videos with the firefighters can be released. We have FEMA running around saying you'll be arrested if you take any photos and ordering you to hand them over to them. But the photos we get show the wreckage hours after. Huge 2-foot and 4-foot steel beams perfectly sliced off at a 45-degree angle with molten steel dripping down over their edges. When you use thermate, and there was also explosives involved, to cut those columns, you don't do it straight across. There are many cases the weight will simply rest and you won't get a collapse. You always cut with the patented thermite reaction at an angle so it shears and slides off. And there are the photos of hundreds of the columns. They even did it for a controlled demolition, so it was easy to take away. Blown in 1- and 2-story pieces, all sliced off perfectly on the record. And so much steel melting when they detonated those thousands of thermite charges that the steel began to flow for minutes before they detonated the secondary explosive charges to give everybody that big spectacular view. No modern steel building had ever collapsed in history, but 3 buildings on that day, the North Tower, the South Tower, and a 47-story building bigger than any building in, 30-plus states. Building 7 perfectly collapsed. Building 7 is the classic demolition where you see the penthouse fall, they blow the central column so it falls in on a neat pile in of itself, not even damaging the U.S. Post Office and another building 20 to 25 feet away on both sides. Perfect textbook controlled demolition. I interviewed engineers that day on 9/11 on my radio show who were there. One of them was Jimmy Wright, worked at the World Financial Center, saying it was the most beautiful, controlled demolition he'd ever seen. Months later, he went into depression. He said he couldn't handle it, that it couldn't be true. But years later, he's come out of it. He's a patriot, and he knows it's an inside job. I've gotten through one, and I've got 4 pages here. I don't think I'll ever do it. I've got to speed through this. They did go too far, as George Humphrey said. They believe they can blow up 3 buildings in front of us and aerosolize the concrete so it shoots out, in some cases, 2-3 miles. There's pieces, 2-story pieces of steel being ejected 300 yards out of the sides. Before the buildings, north and south tower, start collapsing, you see perfect high-powered squibs or ejection points, blast points going boom, 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 boom as they fall. They blew Kennedy's head off 180 miles north of us in 1963 in front of everyone as the back of his head blows off. They tell you he was shot in the back. If you're shot in the back, the front blows off. If you're shot in the front, the back blows off. He was shot in the front from the grassy knoll. Police and hundreds of witnesses see it. And so they thought they could get away with it. This isn't 1963 where there's 3 networks and the newspapers are all owned by the same people. This is 2007. And the old men that run this system must have not listened to their think tanks and their experts, because they had to be telling them this wouldn't work. And that's what tyrants always do. Just like Hitler, they always turn east. They always want more. Just like Napoleon. They always think they're invincible because all the yes men around them. And they always fall. They always fail. And they have failed. A few more points on 9/11. What I think is the most important point, and what's been the most overlooked in my opinion, is that the hijackers were complete and total employees of the federal government. Now let's be clear, they clearly were not hijackers, but the name they've been given is the hijackers. We don't have 1 piece of evidence. We don't have 2 pieces of evidence. We don't have 3 pieces of ironclad evidence. We don't have 4. We've got over 15 pieces of evidence, but I'll only go over 4 in the interest of time. I interviewed within a month after 9/11 Mr. Springman, the head of the U.S. Embassy in Canada and Ottawa. I interviewed the head of the U.S. Embassy as well out of Saudi Arabia. And you've got the supposed 9/11 hijackers in 2000 coming back from an Al-Qaeda summit, as it was billed, in Malaysia. And the computer, when they go over their passports and visas, show these are terrorists. These are Al-Qaeda. These are Al-Qaeda. And so they don't let them in. And so the next day, they get a call from the State Department. 2 separate incidences as they're trying to get back into the U.S. And they're told by the State Department, oh no, let them in, it's okay. They say, the embassy heads say no. Then they get a call from the CIA section chiefs saying, let them in. That terror designation is their cover for anti-terrorism operations. Expanding from there. A month and a half after 9/11, the San Jose Mercury News, and if I was doing a PowerPoint, I'd show it to you, has this headline, Bush behind 9/11, says head of the Defense Language School. And here's the head of the Defense Language School with all this courage to go public. And he says, 3 of these hijackers were trained in high-level spy training, at the Defense Language School in Monterey, California. He was the dean of the school. He was the head of the college, the Spy Signals Training College. He says they were trained here, they've got high security clearances, the government is behind the attacks. The Associated Press picked up the story, but you never saw it on Nightly News, you never saw it in the Washington Post. It is in Terror Storm. I called him up at his house, and it was just like when I called Lou Caccioli, who was a firefighter, fire captain in People magazine, saying bombs were going off. I'll call Lou Caccioli, listen, sir, it's Alex Jones, we're elected you on my radio show. Listen, I really can't talk about it. And his wife's like, I told you, don't get us, don't talk to him. Click. I called the dean of the Defense Language School, but they're threatening to court-martial, but they dropped it for saying the president was behind 9/11, and it's the same thing happening. I called him within a day of that article coming out. I tracked down his number in San Diego. It's unlisted. I call the reporter. I get his number. I call him, and he's scared to death, and his wife's there telling him to hang up the phone. You know what they're going to do to us. They're screaming in the background. I mean, this is when it gets real for you. When you're calling the heads of spy training centers and they're screaming in the background. Okay? Then it gets worse. Then it comes out that the San Diego cell had Mossad living with them, and that the FBI was following them, and that the FBI informant was their landlord paying for their house. Then you learn in Florida they're paying for their credit cards, they're paying for their cars, they're paying for their homes. These guys are constantly dating 2-3 topless dancers a week. They're snorting cocaine, they're drinking whiskey. They're not Muslims. They're U.S. government agents. And they boarded those aircraft believing they were taking part in a drill. And then we go with the whole other discussion of drills for the 2 years before, drills a month before, drills 2 weeks before, and 14 different operations, 5 different drills that morning. And amongst those drills of flying hijacked jets into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. So people all day will try to theorize about the final minutes and exactly what happened. All we know is the official story is a complete lie. The supposed hijackers are U.S. government agents. And George Bush had 44,000 U.S., 18,000 British troops massed in the months before in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, ready to invade Afghanistan. And even Newsweek reported that 2 days before 9/11, he had the launch orders for the war on his desk. It took them months and months and months of preparation for that, and it was already perfectly slated for a week after 9/11. The architecture of this is written up before it even happens. And the scary thing to realize is that they know that they can get us into a big enough crisis, get us into a big enough war, and hype it to the American people that we can't lose, that they plan to suck us into a war with Iran. And the very same people that are setting up the war with Iran, that have set up the war with Iraq by design to exterminate and genocide those people and break that nation up in 3 parts and to spread revolution, that's all declassified. And to balkanize, they call it the global Balkans, that entire region. The very same people that are attacking these sovereign nations are attacking our young with Ritalin and Prozac, and attacking our water with all these toxins and poisons, and attacking us with this entire system that they've set up. These are the very people, by design, that have devalued the dollar by 50% now. These are the very people that have destroyed our real economy and created the fraud. These are the individuals setting up the North American Union and absolving and dissolving our borders right now. This is not our government. It is a group of Machiavellian cold warriors who who have taken this nation and who studied history and other dictators and openly brag that they are going to be more sophisticated and 3 steps ahead of us, and that they're going to bring in their one world government, which is a one world government based on what you can't call Nazism, because the Nazis got their ideas from these people. And it's a war against all humans, against every subgroup of the human race. Their open plan, once it's in place, is an 80+% reduction in our population, forced one-child policies, forced sterilizations, total control. Right here at the University of Texas, Dr. Pianka, a monster, travels to St. Edwards and travels to other universities around the country, and he speaks to halls with over 1,000 people this size or bigger, and there are 95% standing ovations when he says there must be a forced population reduction of 90%. And Dr. Peter Singer at Princeton, the head of the whole department, pushes the same thing. Prince Philip writes the same thing in books he publishes. This is their religion. This is their excuse to cull and kill. Their rationale, their social Darwinistic view. And this is what they push to the right and the left that they control. And after we've seen the black men in syphilis and the government in Tuskegee and the ringworm children, our government, the Israeli government, radiating over 100,000 children, after we witness all the carnage and the examples of what these people have done, is it hard to understand when they have the motive that they would kill 3,000 people to get their new world order on 9/11? I ask you that question. One more point on 9/11. We have Operation Northwoods, written in 1962 by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an operational plan, not a war game, a plan to hijack jets by remote control, to crash them, to bomb D.C., to have the military conduct sniper attacks in D.C. and Miami, to bomb different institutions with plastic explosives, to then blame it on the Soviet Union and launch a war. Meanwhile, our government and the private banks were funding the Soviets, declassified. Our government now admits on History Channel they put Mao Zedong into power. Our government now admits they funded Hitler. All this on record. They build up the threat and then they knock the threat down. But in truth, it's a global government controlled by these banking cartels that is bought and paid for the major Fortune 500 corporations that is waging war against the individual and the people. None of us are safe. None of us have any real future, because all of you can feel in your guts and in your psyche that it's coming to a head. All of you know that everything's accelerating. The development of technologies doubling every 2 years exponentially. Everything now coming together. And the good news here is that I talk to so many people in and out of government, so many police officers, so many people on the street, and almost everyone that I talk to is waking up, is informed, and at least knows deep down that we're in trouble. And the terrorism doesn't come from where the big mainstream controlled media says it does. We are at a very important point in history. Everyone feels that. Everyone intellectually knows that. At every level of our soul, we know that we are at a pivotal point. And we look to others to lead us. We look to others and we expect some big battle, some Custer's last stand to defeat the enemy. That's not going to happen. It is a process. It is an idea. It is a movement. Liberty and human creativity and freedom versus tyranny and despotism and selfishness and destructive tendencies. And I will tell you this, the elite are not as arrogant as they were just a few years ago. They are scared. They know the power that you have. They know the ability you have to affect change. They know throughout history that human populations have resisted dehumanization. Our basic instincts kick in at a deep level that's even more important than our cognitive conscious mind. Everyone knows that this is for real and things are very serious. The individuals running our planet funded and financed the dictators that conservatively killed 200 million people in the last century. So we don't have a choice. This is life and death. We must all put ourselves and all of our will and all of our strength and all of our soul against this tyranny in every way and realize that many hands truly do make light work, and that together, if we resist and stand together, the new world order is destined to fail. We live in a very cynical society, and a lot of people go through the system. They get the little signets and tokens and logos of power. They believe that they're part of the power structure when they're nothing but petty minions, functionaries in a compartmentalized structure, mechanically carrying out their function. And a lot of people get disillusioned talking to these people. You try to warn them, you try to lovingly tell them what's happening, and they laugh at you. And I would simply encourage you to move on. If somebody doesn't fundamentally know that things are wrong in the world, they may wake up someday, but it'll probably be too late at that point for them and those around them. We need to be getting together with the people that do care, the people that are informed, the people that have tuned in and noticed what's happening, and building effective coalitions that can't be bullied or stopped by the Rockefeller and Carnegie and Ford Foundation, right-wing and left-wing stooges that are all on the same payroll. And because we're here at a university, I wanted to spend a few minutes tonight talking about the control of universities, the control of the system. Did you know that UT has several different permanent funds? And it totals over $36 billion. And that is completely separate from the pensions and their budget and all of the expenditures they have. It's state funded. It was free in the past, but now the tuition and the parking and the housing, it all goes up and up and up and up and up and up and up. And it's only a microcosm of the rest of it. What does the UT different funds buy? They buy baseball teams. They buy money in toll roads, stock in toll roads. They purchase technology stocks. It's a business. It's a business. And basically it's a big con and a joke on the students more and more that they're even supposedly getting an education. It's going completely parasitic. And it's the same thing with our counties and our cities and our water districts and these institutions supposedly founded and funded by us to serve us. Did you know the state of Texas has over a $400+ billion surplus every year? Did you know the city of Manhattan has over $1.2 trillion in surplus every year? Oh, it's many times bigger than even their budget. It's a second set of books, the comprehensive financial reports. I made a film about it, a documentary about it. It's publicly available, but it's an open secret, just like government-sponsored terrorism is. And so there's so many facets and so many pieces to the matrix. And they've got teachers and instructors and professors and librarians and students who can barely even live and pay their bills. And meanwhile, the regents of the University of Texas are sitting in gilded chairs, sitting there pontificating about some new football stadium they're going to build. They give you the symbol, they give you a symbol of pride. They give you some symbol to admire, but they don't give you And they begin to take away more and more of the real substance of what a university is all about. And it's still a great university. There's still a lot of great things about it. The point is, we need to be aware of how it's being taken over along with every other institution in our society. These are nothing more than hostile takeovers. And speaking about the anarchist, you've got a lot of well-meaning dupes, useful idiots, as Lenin would call them, who are involved in the anarchist movement. In 1922, the New World Order crowd bombed the New York Stock Exchange and used that to cause a run on banks, which then later helped them put more of their banking rules in place and gave them power. They blamed that on the anarchists. They blamed the kickoff of World War I, supposedly, on the anarchists. And it's always amazed me that the anarchist will go to any event I'm at and say, you're evil because you're not for open borders. But George Bush is for open borders, and it's a globalist plan there's 6+ billion people that want to come in. It's to drive down wages. It's to destroy borders. It's to get rid of any institutions that threaten their global institution. And I've had them walk right up to me and say, some of their leaders, yeah, we work for the government and we're going to kill you someday. And I later talked to some of them and I found out why their leaders, not their useful idiots, are so mad. And it's because in my third film, Police State 2, The Takeover, I showed newscast and raw footage from Seattle where big tax-free government-funded foundations trained about 75 anarchists, housed them in a government building. The police weren't allowed to touch them. And they went out and threw bottles at the cops and burned things and gave the media the images they needed. And then 60,000+ peaceful demonstrators were descended on a day later by the paramilitary police in the black mask and the black armor, the Darth Vader ring wraith outfits. So I made a documentary where I wasn't even making comments. I was showing the fact that the police were saying we were ordered to not do anything to them, and then our own police chief protected them, and they were housed, and they were brought in by government-paid-for buses to go out and wreak havoc, then to be blamed against the good 60,000+ anti-globalization protesters. And then they took those videos of the rioting and showed police departments around the country, oh, look how bad this is. We've got to give you federal funds and give you Darth Vader outfits too. And they fly these anarchists all over the world because they're so afraid of the left in this country, the real left, standing up against globalization, standing up against the New World Order, that they bust these cretins around to cause problems. And it's despicable. And the people that are involved in it should realize. They had the anarchists out Saturday at an anti-war rally. They were up there saying you shouldn't talk about the Bilderbergs, you shouldn't talk about 9/11 truth. No, just the whole pretext for everything we see right now. You shouldn't talk about any of this. It's the elites we've got to worry about. But they don't know who the elites are. And I heard a lady earlier say, who are they? There's less than 20 families. It's the Rothschilds, it's the Rockefellers, it's the Oppenheimers, it's Elizabeth Sachs, Coburg, Gotha. There's books on it. We know who their names are. Last summer, I went to Canada in Ottawa with my crew, got detained at the airport. They said, you're here to cover this, and we're going to send you back. And I called the press on my cell phone, and they showed up, and we got out. And there they were, the Queen of the Netherlands and the Rothschilds and David Rockefeller, all going into this meeting, 125 leaders of the planet. And we've gotten their minutes. We got their minutes from 1954 when they were first officially founded by Prince Bernhard, who was an SS colonel, and his wife, who's still floating around. And we got all the evidence. And they were talking in 54 about how, this was even in the BBC, oh, we'll set up a European Union but just claim it's a trade deal. And we'll do that in the U.S. claiming it's a trade deal. These are the people that run the planet. These are the people that make decisions every month that kill tens of thousands of people. These are the cold-blooded individuals who go into third world countries, and we have the World Bank documents, thanks to Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winner, chief economist, who quit 5 years ago, and these got released, where they go in and pay dictators off or pay governments off to sign over all their infrastructures and then not pay it back by design at 35% interest. They're never meant pay it back. They're paid off to go move to Spain or Switzerland or New York City. They're given the money to leave and sign the entire population over. Their resources, their roads, their infrastructure, and even the people are pledged as collateral to the New World Order. And these central banks create these zeros and ones out of nothing and back it up with our military. That's what they're doing all over the planet. And they create crises. I know I've said that over and over again. They go and they fund and they put Saddam Hussein into power. When he was 18 years old in the late 1950s, declassified. They hired Saddam Hussein, set him up, put him in power. They go in and they overthrow good leaders and put in bad leaders. Literally, they attempt to suppress human development because human development and a middle class and free creative peoples threaten them. It's more advanced and more sophisticated, but you can boil it down to grizzly bears. A male grizzly bear will try to catch the little cubs out with the sow. I think that's what a female bear is called, is a sow. He'll try to catch her out, and by smell, he knows which ones are male. She usually has 2 cubs, and he will run up and kill that male because he is threatened by it later in his reproductive activities. And that's basically what it is. We have these hyper-dominant people that have all the power, already run everything, but they're cynical. They hate people. They're mad at people being happy. They want to crush society. They want to destroy our minds. They don't want us to be free. They don't want us to take part in the advanced technologies, the advanced sciences. They don't want us to have a real part in the future. They tell us that we don't deserve to have a part in the future. They tell us that we don't have a right to be part of the future. And if you read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and you read H.G. Wells' The New World Order nonfiction, or you see his film, Things to Come, or you read what the social Darwinists had to say, it is that religion. You're a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Baptist, you got your religion. Their religion is breeding. We're the elites. We deserve to rule. We're going to control everyone. There's too many of these people, and we're going to sell them that the environment's dying and everything's being destroyed when it's the elite that is fostering programs that actually are causing real problems. And they're going to sell us compact cities, incredible systems of control, total dehumanization. And I, for one, don't want any part of that. The Cold War petered out for them because the system the globalist setup was so tyrannical it collapsed. They moved in, of course, to the war on drugs in the 80s, and since the war on drugs in the 80s, I keep saying that the amount of drugs on our streets and the prison population's tripled. That's old numbers. It's more than quadrupled. And the very government institutions ship in the narcotics. Our cops go out and try to clean them off the streets. Our young people get arrested. They get put in prison. And then they work now 7 million in the system, 4 million plus behind bars, up from 1 million just 12 years ago. They put them behind bars, and many of these big so-called private prison facilities are owned by well-known banks that are involved in drug money laundering. What a great system. You ship the drugs in, the people use it, you catch them, you put them in slave camps where they work for 20 cents an hour, and you know my line, good old boys then ride around and call the talk radio and say, they're in hot tubs watching cable TV, make them work. Number one, they're not in hot tubs watching cable TV. And number two, somebody working for 20 cents an hour is driving down everybody's wages, which is the goal. And that's just one example. So whether it's the war on terror or the war on drugs, it's only meant to get bigger and worse and more expansive. They're winning the war on drugs. The war was against us. The war was to bring in more drugs and sell more of their products and put us in their prisons. They're winning the war on terror. They're getting our liberties and freedoms. They're invading innocent countries. They're destabilizing those nations and exporting revolution. They're destabilizing. Order out of chaos is their creed. And now they want to go for broke. Now they want to escalate into World War III. And I'm not saying Iran's perfect. Man is a fallen creature. Governments are intrinsically out of control. But Iran is nothing compared to North Korea threatening to nuke us, China threatening to nuke us, and of course it's the elites who publicly armed them as well. They claim they want global government for global peace, but the truth is they're building a global police state while destabilizing everything they can to knock out any infrastructure which they don't own. They are destructive, wicked parasites. They are aberrant. And they believe that it's their right to rule and dominate us because they're in power. They believe that it's a strength that they don't have empathy. They believe it's a strength that they don't have a conscience. They believe it's a strength that they can know they're involved in the murder of millions and millions of innocent people in Iraq, most of them children. They believe that that is a power. And the truth is, they're not elitists. They're like a cancer. Just because a cancer can spread through the body and take it over doesn't mean it's elitist. It's literally killing its host. And that's what elites have done throughout history. So we have to do everything we can, possibly, at every level of society, to discredit these people, to discredit the war on terror, to discredit the war on drugs, to defend our national sovereignty, whatever their policy is, no matter how good it sounds and how fancy the PR firm is that wrote up the propaganda. We just simply have to do the opposite of what they push and the opposite of what they say, and we can free this society. I want to thank you for coming out tonight. Choice. We don't have a choice. The New World Order has declared war on humanity, war on the free human spirit. So we need to realize that they've declared war on us and declare war on them right back. You know, it's hard. It's hard in life to stand up to a bully, and it's scary. But it's always better just to fight back, and many times that bully goes down, and we don't have a choice. So again, they've declared war on us. We know they're enemies of free humanity. They've got a bunch of sycophants and control freaks who want to manipulate and think they're best, who've ruined human society, and who are driving us down a rat hole. And we absolutely don't have a choice. We must resist them now. Again, thank you for coming out. Thank you to Project for New American Citizen.